The upcoming race in Suzuka will see lots of teams bring upgrades to their cars, but the most interesting ones are right at the top of the table, where Ferrari will try to bridge the gap even closer to Red Bull by speeding up the process that was originally meant to be introduced in Imola. However, these two, although stealing the most of the spotlight, won't be the only teams that will hope to improve in the high-speed corner nature in Suzuka. And it seems like the entire grid will be hoping to grab as much points as possible by trying out new things, whether they're in the form of upgrades or just setup changes like Mercedes. So with this in mind, what are the teams bringing to one of the most legendary circuits in F1? Well, let's start this video with Ferrari, the team that has the momentum on its side and the team that had a dominant 1-2 win in Melbourne, even though it took Verstappen out of the race for them to complete this achievement in the first place. However, the Maranello team has fixed a lot of the issues that plagued the performance of the car in the past couple of years, mostly because they brought in a new platform that's much more stable and predictable to bring upgrades on. But this is just the launch spec car that we have seen in the first 3 races, and after being criticised for taking a way too conservative approach with it, the SF24 will see a huge part of the Imola upgrades being mounted in Suzuka, because they understood that every point matters now, and this could be yet another dominant weekend in their fashion. For example, 2 massive working points on their car were the floor and the side pod design, which are poised to improve the airflow even further and make the car's competitiveness rise to another level. It's still unknown which part would be promoted because the team, as any other squad out there, wants to take things slow by seeing whether or not that particular part of the car will be compatible and effective enough for the foreseeable future. Of course, if they do that with the 2 parts at the same time, they're facing a risk which will throw them off the scent because they would be all over the place with these parts and they would have no idea where the deficit comes from. That is, if the deficit in performance happens in the first place. With this in mind, we're thrilled to see what Ferrari has stacked up for Suzuka, even though Sainz has approached this weekend with a careful statement that until the full package, or more precisely the 2.0 version of the SF24 arrives in Imola, they'll have a hard time matching the pace of the RB20. To top that off, the RB20 is not going to be sitting back and waiting for the rest of the grid to be catching them up. Quite the contrary. This is the team that made quite some bold moves when it comes to changing the design of the car in the middle of a dominating era, because they felt like they have reached the ceiling with the RB19, and if they were to pursue more performance out of that design, they would have ended up being vulnerable and caught up by teams like Ferrari or McLaren. But the direction they've decided to go in has caught many by surprise, because they chase what Mercedes dubbed to be a failure of design for 2 straight years, the zero-pod design, or at least their own version of it. On paper, this is the best version that a team could build in order to extract the maximum amount of downforce from the floor. But given the fact that the sweet spot of the car is very easily lost throughout this process, the stability as well as the porpoising are 2 main obstacles that have the potential to ruin Red Bull's upgrade package. Nevertheless, Suzuka will see the team introducing a vertical side pod inlet due to cooling purposes, and they've left this part open due to the high temperatures in the first 3 races of the season. What this essentially means is that Red Bull will see the first step of the massive upgrade that will arrive in Imola, just like Ferrari. And similarly to the Maranello team, they'll be exploiting only one of the 2 massive aerodynamic surfaces that would have to be converted with a proper design of the car in order to make it work as a whole. What the Austrian team has done is exploit a loophole in the aerodynamic testing restriction rule that enables them to extract the maximum potential of these parts without actually being restricted in the first place. The Austrian team is quite famous when it comes to generating downforce, primarily through their roof and then with the rest of the car. So it would be highly interesting to see whether or not this new floor would make the car highly competitive in the upcoming races, because many believe that they've set a ceiling that is unmatchable in the previous couple of years due to its complexity. However, it's believed that a new version of the RB20's floor won't debut in Suzuka, or more precisely V-Carb will have this part mounted on their car in the upcoming race. This could be done because Red Bull would want to see whether or not they can gather the data necessary in order to make the necessary changes on their challenger, which would come in Imola. And it's yet another indicator that having a customer team helps your development process a lot, even if you're a team like Red Bull, who managed to absolutely shatter the current aerodynamic era. Racing Bulls are set to bring a crucial floor upgrade to the Japanese GP, and it would have an immense importance due to the fact that Honda, the supplier of their engines, and Tsunoda are going to want to prove strong on their home turf and ride on the momentum in Melbourne, where Tsunoda finished P8 only for him to be promoted to P7 after Alonso's demotion and the 20-second penalty the two-time world champion received. The new rear wing that the V-Carb 01 has been mounted on in Melbourne has a new specification, and in addition of it being with a different accommodation, it has less main plane spoon and is quite lighter, which helps the car with the everlasting battle when it comes to the weight of it. The different pattern of overlapping fibers on the wing creates a different airflow, and when you add all of the details in one, you end up with a product that helps with the stability of the car as well as the generation of downforce, with the primary question being whether or not Ricciardo can make full usage of these rules and keep his seat alive in F1 thanks to the upcoming upgrade revolving around the floor of the car. This upgrade has been divided in two sequels, the first one being introduced in Suzuka, while the completion will happen in Imola, as the one in Italy is poised to address the surface and improve the overall concept of the V-Carb 01. The first one, however, which is planned for Imola, will have a sole goal of distancing itself from the AT04, which was the challenger in 2023. Elaborating on this matter even further, Jody Eggington, the technical director of the team, went on to talk about the goals with the new upgrade, adding, "I expect that we'll be able to start taking advantage of the upcoming event, with the aim of entering the battle in the middle of the field as soon as possible. We cannot wait for the next phase of the season. The group in the center is very small. We'll focus on making every update count." And although Mercedes won't bring any specific upgrades to Suzuka due to their own never-ending process with learning as much as they can about the car and experimenting in desperate tries to overcome the growing deficit to Ferrari, McLaren and Red Bull, the tweaks in their setup revolving around the rear suspension and the front of the car will give them a clear window as to where they're currently standing with their own challenger. Right now, the Silver Arrows are going to work on the aerodynamic surfaces of the car due to the demanding layout that Suzuka has, requiring maximum efficiency and a wide operating window, with Mercedes aiming to understand the flow trends through simulation to optimize the aerodynamic efficiency of the car. This, however, is going to be questionable to say the least, because we already know about the issues when it comes to the correlation of data from the simulator to the on-track performance. But it's an issue that Mercedes needs to tackle as soon as possible if they want to be competing up front, with Suzuka being the first track to do so. Furthermore, Mercedes will focus on maximizing the rear load and reduce the front wing flap incident for improved stability and efficiency of the car by optimizing the new pushrod rear suspension. In this section, Mercedes will make adjustments to alleviate the understeer and maintain the stability of the car, with further modifications made to the wishbone inclinations and pushrod angles, securing this scenario as well, improving the energy transfer without increased tyre degradation as well. The front suspension won't remain idle either, as the adjustments made here will aim to reduce stiffness, balance the car towards the rear and limit the oversteer of the W15. So with all this in mind, which team do you think will emerge as the one that learned the most from the Suzuka upgrade? Let us know in the comments down below.